There is a specific, suffocating agony in watching the man you built an empire with hand your crown to a stranger. Not a clean pain, not the sharp, merciful kind that arrives fast and leaves. This is the slow kind. The kind that settles into your bones on a quiet Tuesday morning while you are standing in a herb garden you planted with your own hands, listening to someone else rearrange the furniture inside the house you saved. That was Seraphina Finch on the morning of the ceremony. She was 30 years old, standing in damp Virginia soil in her best navy dress, holding a cup of coffee that had gone completely cold, listening to Lorelei Voss issue instructions to the decorating crew through the open window above her head. More white ribbon on the altar columns. And can someone move those awful wooden chairs? But they look like something from a barn. Seraphina looked down at the lavender she had planted 3 springs ago because the pack's youngest pups were having nightmares, and she had read that the scent helped them sleep. She had not slept in 11 days. She drank the cold coffee anyway, set the mug on the stone wall, straightened her dress, and made herself a single, quiet promise. She would walk into that ceremony hall with her spine straight and her face composed. She would stand at the back like a guest at someone else's wedding. She would speak the words of severance when Elder Ephraim called her name. She would do it all without flinching. And then she would leave. What she did not know, what she could not have known, was that a man she had never met was already in a vehicle, driving through the pre-dawn dark of the Shenandoah Valley at speeds that made his security detail grip their door handles and say nothing, because you did not tell the Alpha King to slow down. Not when he drove like a man who had felt something break from 2,000 miles away and was not willing to arrive 1 minute later than necessary. Not when the thing that broke was his. The Iron Veil Pack's territory covered nearly 30,000 acres of rural Virginia, dense forest, rolling farmland, and a quietly profitable organic lumber operation that most of the pack's neighbors, human and wolf alike, assumed had always been there. It had not always been there. 6 years ago, when Seraphina Finch arrived at Iron Veil with a battered leather satchel and a logistics degree from a human university in Richmond, the pack's finances were in a condition that could only generously be described as catastrophic. The previous alpha, a man named Rufus Cross, who had led Iron Veil for 20 years on charm and stubbornness and very little else, had left behind a legacy of unpaid debts, broken supplier contracts, a pack house with a leaking roof, and a treasury that contained, quite literally, less money than the cost of fixing it. Rufus had not been a bad man. He had simply been the kind of leader who believed that strength of will was a substitute for a functioning budget. It was not. When he stepped down and Isaac Doolin took the alpha title at 26, young, broad-shouldered, determined, and quietly drowning, Seraphina had already been at Iron Veil for 3 weeks, working out of a borrowed desk in the back office, untangling 6 years of financial disaster with a yellow legal pad and a ferocity that made the pack elders deeply uncomfortable. She was not his fated mate. That was always the unspoken asterisk hanging over everything they built together. The moon goddess had not written their names in the same sentence. They had chosen each other, or rather, they had chosen the pack together, and found each other somewhere inside that shared purpose. Isaac had come to her office, her borrowed desk, her yellow legal pad, on a Thursday evening in October, 6 years ago. He had knocked on the open door even though it was his pack house. She had looked up. He had said, very directly, "I need someone who understands what I'm looking at when I read these numbers, and I think that might be you." She had turned the legal pad around so he could see what she had found. He had stared at it for a long time. "How bad is it?" he had asked. "Survivable," she had said. "If we move in the next 30 days." They had moved in the next 30 days, and the 30 days after that, and the 30 days after that, for 6 years, until Iron Vale Pack was something entirely different from the struggling, demoralized collection of wolves that Rufus Cross had left behind. The lumber operation had been Seraphina's idea, a proper one, registered under her human alias as Finch and McGraw Agricultural Holdings, structured carefully and legally as an independent LLC, with herself as the sole signatory. She had done it that way for accounting reasons at the time. Clean separation between pack assets and business contracts. Standard practice. Well, nobody had looked closely enough at the structure to ask questions. She had negotiated the Weyerhaeuser timber contracts herself, driving to their regional office in Roanoke on a Tuesday in February, with a proposal document she had printed at the gas station because the pack house printer was out of ink. She had come back with a signed agreement and a 10-year partnership. She had organized the pack's medical fund. She had mediated a border dispute with the Harlan pack to the north without a single claw drawn, sitting across a conference table from Alpha Harlan Bonner, with her files organized by color and her voice absolutely steady, while he tried to intimidate her with his size, and she tried to bore him into agreeing with her documentation. It had worked. She had established a proper rotating patrol schedule, bought a pack education fund for the pups, and a winter supply program so that no Iron Vale family spent November wondering how they would pay for heating oil. She wore the lunar title without the moon goddess's blessing. She wore it in the currency of 6 years of Tuesday morning budget reviews and Thursday evening border calls, and every quiet, invisible act of maintenance that kept 180 wolves warm, fed, and safe. Then Isaac went to the diplomacy summit in Charleston. It was a routine trip, a 4-day conference of Southeastern pack leaders, the kind of event Seraphina usually attended with him. But a flu outbreak had moved through the pack's pup nursery that week, and she had stayed behind to manage it. She had sent Isaac with a folder of talking points, a prepared position on the Eastern Trade Corridor dispute, and a list of 3 alphas she wanted him to avoid committing anything to without calling her first. He came back on a Tuesday. Seraphina was in the office, their office, the one they had shared for 6 years, with the mahogany desk she had organized and reorganized until it ran like a small, perfect machine. When she heard the front door, she heard 2 sets of footsteps, and she heard a scent, warm honey, expensive perfume. And beneath both of those things, threaded through the air like a current in deep water, the unmistakable electric hum of a fated mate bond. She knew before she heard the door open. She knew before Isaac appeared in the doorway, with his jaw set and his eyes unable to quite find hers, and a beautiful young woman standing half a step behind him, with her fingers laced through his. She knew, and she sat very still, as because she was Seraphina Finch, and sitting still in the middle of catastrophe was the first skill she had ever mastered. "Seraphina," Isaac said. His voice was careful, guilty, final. She looked at him, at the protective set of his shoulders angled toward the woman behind him, at the way his hand held hers with the unconscious, absolute certainty of something biological, something the moon goddess had written. "This is Lorelei," he said. The goddess made her choice, Sarah. Lorelei is my fated mate." Seraphina looked at Lorelei Voss for the first time. She was 22. Dark blonde hair, wide brown eyes, a face that the universe had clearly arranged with considerable care and attention. She smelled of warm honey and a perfume that cost more than Seraphina's quarterly office supply budget. She was looking at Seraphina with an expression that was not quite triumph and not quite apology. Something in between. Something that had never had to decide which one it was. "I see," Seraphina said. Her voice was dangerously calm. "What does this mean for the pack operations?" Isaac blinked. He had clearly prepared for tears or anger. Practical questions were harder. "Lorelei will be Luna," he said. "It's—" "You know the law, Sarah. A true bonded Luna. The pack needs—" "I understand the law," Seraphina said. She stood up. She smoothed the front of her trousers. "I will need 2 weeks to prepare a transition document. I will attend the succession ceremony for the stability of the pack. After that, I will leave Ironvale." Isaac's face fractured slightly. "I was hoping you might stay on. As an advisor, perhaps." "No," Seraphina said. One word. Quiet and absolute as a door closing. She excused herself. She walked down the hallway to the small guest bathroom at the end of the corridor, the one the pups used after muddy patrol runs. She locked the door. She sat on the edge of the bathtub. She did not cry loudly. She was not the kind of woman who cried loudly. But she pressed both hands, flat against her knees, and let the grief move through her for exactly 7 minutes, because she was also not the kind of woman who pretended grief was not real. Then she washed her face, unlocked the door, walked back to the office. Lorelei was sitting in Seraphina's chair. The 2 weeks that followed were a masterclass in a specific kind of suffering that has no clean name. Seraphina watched her belongings move to a guest bedroom, while Lorelei consulted with a design firm in Richmond about replacing the pack house's earthy, practical interior with something she described as elevated rustic glamour, which turned out to mean imported marble, crystal light fixtures, and furniture that looked beautiful and sat like sitting on an expensive cloud. She watched Lorelei tour the office, their office, and ask where the good coffee machine was and whether the desk could be moved to catch better light. She watched Isaac look at Lorelei the way a compass needle finds north. Absolute. Automatic. Impossible to argue with. She didn't argue with it. She packed her personal files, the ones registered to Finch and McGraw Holdings, the contracts with Weyerhaeuser, the banking agreements, the operational licenses, made all the paperwork that carried her name, and therefore, legally and completely, belonged to her. She packed them into her scuffed leather briefcase with the broken clasp she had never gotten around to fixing. She packed 2 canvas duffel bags with her clothes and her books, and the framed photograph of herself and Isaac from 3 years ago, the one where they were both covered in mud after a successful rogue patrol near the southern border, both laughing at something she couldn't remember anymore. The night before the ceremony, she took the photograph out of the frame. She tore it precisely in half. She dropped Isaac's half into the waste bin. She kept her half. Not because she was sentimental, because she looked happy in it, and she wanted to remember that she had been once, and that she could be again. Sarah Hobbs found her in the guest room at 9:30 that evening, sitting on the edge of the bed with the photograph half in her hand and the navy dress laid out for mourning. "You don't have to go," Sarah said. Sarah was the pack's head healer, small, sharp-tongued, with grey-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had been Seraphina's only real friend at Ironvale, the kind of friend who told you the truth even when the truth had bad timing. "Nobody would blame you for walking away tonight." "The elders would," Seraphina said. "They'd say I left out of bitterness. It would fracture the transition." "Let it fracture," Sarah said. "You don't owe them a graceful exit." "I'm not doing it for them," Seraphina said quietly. "I'm doing it for the pups. For the families in the Eastern housing block who are counting on the winter supply program I built. For the 180 wolves who didn't choose any of this. If I disappear before the formal severance, the uncertainty destabilizes the pack. I won't do that to them. Sarah looked at her for a long time. Then she sat down on the bed beside her and took her hand. After tomorrow, Sarah said, you go somewhere good. Yes, Seraphina agreed. She did not sleep that night. She lay in the dark in the guest room that smelled like someone else's laundry and thought about the herb garden. She thought about whether the lavender would be properly maintained. She thought about old Mrs. Pearl Haskins in the northern quarter of the territory who needed her arthritis medication collected from the town pharmacy every Thursday without fail. She thought about 100 small acts of care that she had woven into the structure of Iron Veil Pack like invisible thread, holding everything together, and about what would happen when the thread was gone. She thought about it until the sky began to lighten. Then she got up, washed her face, put on the navy dress, and went downstairs to attend the ceremony that would end her life in this place. The grand hall of the Iron Veil Pack house had been, for 6 years, a place of practical dignity. Seraphina had kept it that way intentionally. Stone floors, warm timber walls, long tables that could seat the entire pack for solstice gatherings, oil paintings of the Virginia mountains commissioned from a local human artist who had no idea her clients were wolves, clean lines, useful beauty, was a room that said, "We are serious people who take care of each other." Lorelei had spent 4 days undoing all of it. The stone floors were covered in white fabric runners imported from a supplier in Charlottesville. White silk draped every column and cascaded from the high ceiling in theatrical waves. Crystal arrangements the height of a wolf pup's shoulder flanked the center aisle. The altar, a simple, ancient stone platform that had witnessed pack oaths for 3 generations, had been surrounded by white floral arrangements, so dense it was barely visible. It looked, Seraphina thought, exactly like a very expensive human wedding that had accidentally wandered into the wrong building. 180 Iron Veil wolves were seated in rows of unfamiliar rented chairs, dressed in their formal best, radiating a collective discomfort that Seraphina could feel from the back of the room. Half of them had not looked at her since she arrived. The other half had looked at her with expressions she had to work to keep herself from responding to. The quiet fury of the elder women in the 3rd row, the guilty helplessness of the younger betas who had grown up watching her run the pack's logistics from that mahogany desk. Sarah stood beside her, warm and solid, their shoulders touching. "She fired the kitchen staff," Sarah murmured, her voice barely above a breath. 3 of them. Said they didn't know how to make French pastry, and she wasn't going to live on what she called simple cooking. Clara Bonner has been feeding the nursery pups out of her own pantry for the last 5 days. Seraphina said nothing. She filed the information quietly in the part of her mind that was already, despite everything, cataloguing what would need to be fixed when someone competent was running things again. At the front of the hall, the low, ancient rhythm of the pack drums began. Elder Ephraim Conway emerged from the side door first, tall, white-haired, wearing the traditional grey ceremonial robes. Ephraim was the oldest of Iron Veil's elders, a man of 73 who had known Rufus Cross and had watched Isaac Doolin grow from a pup into an alpha with a mixture of pride and the particular worry of a man who has seen enough to know that potential is not the same as judgment. He had always been decent to Seraphina. She had always been grateful for it. He did not look at her now. His eyes were fixed on the altar with an expression that sat somewhere between solemnity and deep personal discomfort. Isaac emerged from the same side door 30 seconds later. He wore a charcoal suit, the good one, the one Seraphina had advised him to buy 2 years ago for the regional Alpha Summit. He looked striking. He always had. He was broad and steady and carried the Alpha aura with a natural, easy authority that had made Seraphina believe, for 6 years, that the two of them together were something formidable. She looked at him now and felt nothing. Not anger, not grief, not the hot, particular ache she had expected. Just a strange, still blankness, like a room that has been emptied of furniture. She recognized him. She did not recognize anything she had felt for him. She supposed that was how healing felt when you did not have time to notice it happening. The drums shifted into the processional rhythm. Lorelei walked down the center aisle. She was luminous. There was no other honest word for it. She wore a silver gown that caught every flicker of the crystal-filtered light, her dark blonde hair arranged in an elaborate style that must have taken hours, her brown eyes bright with the particular radiance of someone who has waited their whole life to be the center of a room this large and is discovering it feels exactly as wonderful as she imagined. She was not cruel. Seraphina had thought about this carefully over 11 days, and she kept arriving at the same conclusion. Lorelei Voss was not a bad person. She was simply someone whose entire existence had been framed around being chosen, being beautiful, as being wanted, and she had never been required to understand what it cost to build something from nothing. She had never planted anything in the cold and waited through the winter to see whether it would grow. She would learn, or she would not. Either way, it was no longer Seraphina's problem. When Lorelei reached the altar and Isaac took her hands, lifting them to press a reverent kiss to her knuckles, a small sound moved through the seated pack. Not applause, not quite, but a collective exhale of something complicated. The fated mate bond between them was visible, almost. A warmth, an electricity, something the entire room could feel at the edges of their own wolves. Elder Ephraim raised his arms for silence. "We gather today under the watchful eye of the moon goddess," he said. His voice was steady and formal and contained, now Seraphina thought, a very faint note of apology underneath everything else. To honor the laws of our ancestors, Alpha Isaac Doolin has found his fated mate. Today we witness the transfer of the lunar title and the binding of their souls. The silver dagger rested on its velvet cushion at the edge of the altar. Before the blood is drawn, Elder Ephraim continued, the current Luna must formally sever her claim. Seraphina Finch, step forward. The room went absolutely silent. 180 pairs of eyes turned to the back of the hall. Seraphina took one breath. She let go of Sarah's hand. She began to walk. The center aisle was not long, perhaps 40 feet from the back of the room to the base of the altar. She had walked it dozens of times, for solstice gatherings, for pack meetings, or for the winter ceremony 3 years ago, when she had presented the new family housing program to a room full of exhausted, grateful wolves. She had never noticed before how long 40 feet could be. She kept her chin level. Her posture was exactly what it always was, composed, upright, the particular stillness of a woman who had learned very early that visibly struggling was a luxury she could not afford. She did not look at Isaac. She did not look at Lorelei's expression, which she suspected contained something she did not want to see. She looked at Elder Ephraim. She walked toward him. She did not waver. When she reached the base of the altar, she stopped. She did not bow. She hadn't bowed to this altar when she was made Luna, and she wouldn't bow to it now. She opened her mouth to speak the words of severance, but the pine doors at the entrance to the hall came off their frames, not opened, not thrown open. Off their frames, both of them simultaneously, flung inward with a force so sudden and absolute that the sound was less like a door and more like the air itself splitting apart. The heavy iron hinges sheared, fragments of the doorframe scattered across the white fabric runners. The crystal arrangements in the back row shuddered, and one of them tipped and fell, shattering across the stone floor beneath the fabric. The sound hit the room like a physical blow. 180 wolves reacted in the same instant. The ancient, unthinking defense response. Wolves dropping into protective crouches, teeth bared, eyes flashing to their wolf colors. A chorus of growls rose and then, in the same breath, died. Because the aura arrived. It came in like deep water. Not a wave, not a rush, but the slow, absolute, pressurized weight of something so far above the room's natural order that the room's natural order simply yielded to it. Seraphina felt it hit her wolf like a hand pressed flat against her chest. The instinct to kneel was immediate and enormous, the kind of instinct that did not ask for permission. Around the room, wolves dropped. Not dramatically. Simply, inevitably, knees meeting the floor in a ripple from back to front, like a field of tall grass laid flat by a wind moving through it. Isaac buckled at the altar, one knee cracking hard against the stone platform, his golden alpha eyes going wide with shock before his head bowed. Lorelei let out a soft, startled sound and simply folded, silver gown pooling around her on the altar floor, her hands pressed flat, her elaborate hair disarranged. Elder Ephraim's white head bent toward the stone. Seraphina felt the pressure. She felt it press against her wolf with the full, crushing weight of something ancient and absolute and immeasurably powerful. And then it shifted. It did not release her. It changed. It recognized her. The weight became warmth. The pressure became something else entirely. Electric, specific, threaded through with a scent she had no name for and had somehow already memorized. Wood smoke and winter cedar, and something beneath both of those things that was not a smell at all, but more like the particular feeling of a door opening into a room that has always been yours. Her wolf, which had been silent and small and folded into itself for 11 days, slammed against her ribs. Not in distress, in recognition. The howl that rose in her chest was not grief. It was not anger. It was the howl of something finding, after a very long search, exactly what it had been looking for. Seraphina did not kneel. She was still standing, still facing the ruined doorway, when Alpha King Marmon Richmond walked through it. He was tall, broader than she had expected from the descriptions she had half heard over the years. The Alpha King was a myth to most West Coast packs, a name spoken with careful respect by the southeastern packs who sat closer to his actual authority. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, dark hair slightly wind-tossed from what must have been a very fast drive. His eyes were a deep, storm cloud grey. Those eyes moved through the hall the way a general surveys a field, quick, complete, and already several steps ahead of everyone else in the room. Then they found her. And they stopped. He walked the full length of the center aisle. He did not look at the kneeling wolves. He did not look at Isaac on the altar, or Lorelei on the floor, or Elder Ephraim's bowed white head. He walked as though the only relevant thing in the room was the woman standing at the end of the aisle who had not knelt. He stopped in front of her. He was close enough that she had to tilt her chin slightly to meet his eyes, close enough that the warmth of the mate bond between them was almost a physical thing, not an idea, not an instinct, but a presence, as real and undeniable as the ruined doorframe behind him. For a moment, he simply looked at her. The storm-grey eyes moved across her face with an expression that was not quite what she expected from the most powerful wolf on the eastern seaboard. It was not dominance. It was not authority. It was relief. Raw, honest, and quietly devastating relief. I felt it, Marmon Richmond said. His voice was low and even, pitched to carry no further than the two of them, though the silence in the hall meant every wolf in the room heard every word. When your heart broke, it woke me from a dead sleep. He reached out. Slowly, deliberately, giving her every opportunity to step back if she chose. She did not step back. He tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear with a gentleness that should not have been possible from a man currently radiating enough authority to keep 180 wolves pinned to the floor. The touch sent a current straight through her, sharp and warm and certain. His eyes moved past her then, to the altar. To Isaac. The relief in his expression evaporated. What replaced it was something cold and final, and entirely without theatre. "I came," Marmon said, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated in the stone walls, to collect what a careless man failed to recognize as irreplaceable. The silence in the hall was absolute. Then he offered her his arm. It was not a command. It was a choice. His eyes came back to hers, and they were asking, clearly and without pressure, what she wanted. Seraphina looked past him, at Isaac, kneeling on the altar, his face a complicated architecture of shock and guilt, and something that might have been the beginning of understanding, arriving much too late. At Lorelei on the floor in her silver gown, looking small and frightened and very young. At Elder Ephraim's bowed head. At Sarah Hobbs, though still standing at the back of the room, the only other wolf beside Seraphina still on her feet, because Sarah Hobbs had a wolf too old and too stubborn to be easily impressed by anybody's aura, with tears running silently down her face and something in her expression that Seraphina recognized as fierce, unqualified joy. Seraphina turned back to the man in front of her. She slipped her hand into the crook of his arm. The walk out of the hall was not long. It felt like 100 years and no time at all. When they stepped out through the ruined doorway into the grey Virginia evening, the air was cold and sharp with pine and the particular clarity that follows a long rain. A line of black vehicles waited on the gravel drive. Her 2 canvas duffel bags and her leather briefcase were already loaded into the lead vehicle. Marmon opened the door. "How did you know what to pack?" she asked. "Wyatt," he said simply. She looked at him. "My head of security," he said. He drove ahead. He asked Sarah Hobbs. She nodded once. She got into the vehicle. He got in beside her, and the door closed, and the gravel crunched beneath the tires, and Ironvale Pack's sprawling estate fell away behind the darkened glass. She did not look back. The drive to the Richmond estate took 4 hours on roads that wound through the Shenandoah Valley like something a painter had arranged for effect. Dark mountain ridges against a sky going from grey to black, the occasional light of a farmhouse in a hollow, the smell of wood smoke and cold earth that Virginia carries in November like a signature. Seraphina sat in the back of the lead vehicle, watching the dark landscape move past the window, aware of Marmon beside her with the particular, heightened awareness of someone whose wolf was paying extremely close attention to every breath in the room. He did not fill the silence with conversation. She appreciated that more than she could have said. Wyatt Turlough drove. She could see the back of his head, close-cropped and steady, the particular stillness of a man accustomed to driving in situations that required discretion. He had introduced himself briefly when she got in, shook her hand with a grip that was firm without performing anything, and then returned his attention to the road. After perhaps 30 minutes, Marmon spoke. "I have known about you," he said, "for 3 years." She turned from the window to look at him. "The Weyerhaeuser agreement," he said. It came across my desk as part of the Eastern Trade Corridor Review, or the primary signatory on the Iron Veil side was a human LLC called Finch and McGraw Holdings. I had my legal team look into it. He paused. They could not find a single clause that wasn't watertight. In 3 years of corridor reviews, I have never seen a pack-adjacent contract structured with that level of precision. Seraphina said nothing for a moment. You looked into me. I looked into the contract, he said. I looked into you afterward. The grey eyes were direct and entirely unapologetic. I found a chosen Luna running a 30,000-acre pack's entire financial infrastructure through a legally independent entity registered in her own name. I found someone who had quietly ensured that her value to the pack was documented, demonstrable, and portable. That wasn't strategy, she said. It was accounting. It was both, he said. You just didn't know you'd need it yet. She looked at him. He was watching her with an expression that was not complicated. It was just honest, the particular honesty of someone who has no remaining interest in performing anything. How long have you known I was yours? She asked. He was quiet for a moment. The road curved through a mountain pass, and the headlights caught a wall of dark pine on either side. Long enough, he said, to know that whatever you were building in that pack was yours, and that the man you were building it with did not deserve to be the person you built it for. She turned back to the window. She pressed her fingers flat against her knee and let the mate bond hum between them, present and warm and not demanding anything, just there. I wasn't going to go, she said, to the ceremony. Sarah told me not to. Why did you? Because 180 wolves needed to see me stand there, she said. Needed to see that the transition was stable, that I wasn't... She stopped. That you weren't broken, he said quietly. Yes. And are you? She considered the question honestly, the way she considered everything. I don't know yet, she said. I will be. I have been before. He did not offer her reassurance. She was grateful. Empty reassurance was the one thing she had never had any patience for. The Richmond estate announced itself first as a glow in the valley below, not dramatic, but substantial, the warm, steady light of something large and well-maintained. As the motorcade descended the mountain road, the estate resolved into detail, a complex of modern buildings built into the mountainside with the particular intelligence of architecture that has thought about the landscape rather than imposed upon it. Glass and dark timber and stone, clean lines, serious purpose. It looked, Seraphina thought, like a place that worked. Wyatt showed her to her suite, a set of rooms on the estate's upper level, with a view of the private lake and the mountains beyond it. The suite was separate from Marmon's quarters by an entire corridor. She noted this. It told her something specific and important about the kind of man she was dealing with. The suite had been prepared with a precision that she found, despite everything, quietly remarkable. Her preferred brand of coffee, the one she ordered online, which was not a common brand, was in the kitchen. A stack of current financial journals was on the desk. A wool throw in a deep burgundy, which was her favorite color, was folded over the arm of the reading chair. She stood in the middle of the room for a long moment, holding her leather briefcase, the broken clasp pressing against her palm. She had not been taken care of in a very long time. She had forgotten what it felt like. She put the briefcase on the desk. She opened it and took out the photograph half, herself laughing in the mud in front of the southern border fence. She set it on the desk beside the financial journals. Not sentimentality, just evidence that she had been happy, once, and would be again. Then she opened her laptop and went to work. Dinner was in a small dining room she had not been expecting. Not a formal space, but a warm, low-ceilinged room with a stone fireplace and a table set for two. Marmon was already there when Wyatt walked her in, standing by the fire with 2 cups of coffee, still in the charcoal suit with the jacket removed and the sleeves of his black shirt rolled to the elbow. He looked, without the full weight of the king's authority arranged around him, like a man who was tired and trying not to show it. She recognized that feeling precisely. They sat. The meal was simple: roasted vegetables, bread, something with lamb that smelled of rosemary. Not performative. Just food, prepared well, by someone who understood that the point of food was to sustain people. "Tell me about the holdings company," he said. "Not tell me about Isaac. Not tell me about the ceremony, or not any of the things people typically wanted to discuss after a dramatic exit from a succession ritual. The holdings company. The thing she had built." She told him. Not the emotional version. She did not yet have access to the emotional version, which was still somewhere behind a door she intended to open when she was alone and had the time. She told him the operational version, how she had structured it, why she had chosen an independent LLC over a PAC-registered entity, how the Weyerhaeuser contract had been negotiated, what the Eastern Corridor logistics looked like from the ground. He listened the way very few people had ever listened to her. Completely. With his full attention, asking questions that demonstrated he had understood what she said before asking the next one. Not performing interest. Actually interested. It was, she thought, the most disarming thing about him. She talked for perhaps 45 minutes. When she stopped, he refilled her coffee cup without asking, and said, "What do you want to do with it?" Not what are you going to do about Isaac, not what happens now. What do you want to do with the thing you built? She looked at her coffee. "I don't know yet," she said. "I was focused on getting through today." "That's reasonable," he said. "I found a tax loophole in your European logistics division before dinner," she said. "Your accounting team missed a deduction in the Portuguese subsidiary that's been accumulating for 3 years. I can walk you through it tomorrow." He stared at her. Then he laughed, a real one, unguarded and warm and completely unprepared for. It changed his face entirely. The storm cloud authority dissolved, and underneath it was just a man, genuinely surprised by the person sitting across from him, genuinely delighted by it. "How much?" he asked. "Rough estimate? About 3.5 million over the 3 years." He shook his head slowly. "I'm going to have a conversation with my accounting team." "Yes," she agreed. "You are." She went back to her suite that night and sat in the reading chair with the burgundy throw and found, somewhere around midnight, that the grief she had been managing so carefully for 11 days was choosing this moment to arrive properly. It was not about Isaac. She examined it carefully in the way she examined everything, and confirmed. It was not about Isaac. It was about the herb garden, about the pack, about the pups whose nightmares she had soothed with lavender, about old Pearl Haskins and her Thursday medication pickup. She had not lost a man. She had lost a home. Those were different griefs, and they deserved different acknowledgement. She allowed herself an hour of honest, private sadness. She did not perform it. She simply sat in the chair and let it move through her, and when it had passed enough to breathe around, she washed her face and opened her laptop again. She found another accounting error in the Richmond estate's domestic budget before she slept. She would tell him in the morning. 2 weeks into her time at the Richmond estate, Seraphina had reorganized Marmon's domestic accounting system, identified 3 redundant security contracts that were costing the estate money for services already covered by other agreements. I had established a direct encrypted communication line with the Eastern Corridor's 5 largest pack alphas that the Royal Court had been attempting to formalize for 2 years through a series of meetings that had accomplished nothing. She had done this, primarily, between 6 in the morning and 9, before Marmon's daily council briefings began. "She terrifies me," Wyatt told Marmon one afternoon. They were standing in the corridor outside the main conference room, where Seraphina was currently explaining to 3 senior Beta guards why their proposed Eastern Border Patrol rotation had a structural vulnerability in its Thursday coverage, and what the corrected schedule should look like. The 3 guards, all of them experienced, all of them large, but all of them accustomed to being the most competent people in any given room, were taking notes. Genuinely. I have been in this position for 12 years. I have never taken notes in a patrol briefing. I am taking notes. Marmon watched through the glass panel of the conference room door. Seraphina had a marker and a whiteboard. She drew clear, clean diagrams. She explained her reasoning in straightforward sentences that left no room for misinterpretation. When one of the guards offered a counterpoint, she paused, considered it with visible sincerity, and either incorporated it or explained specifically why it wouldn't work. She was not performing authority. She simply had it. "She found $4 million in the European accounting," Marmon said. "I know," Wyatt said. "She told me. Or she also told me our medical supply contracts are being invoiced at a 17% markup by a supplier in Atlanta, and suggested 3 alternatives." He paused. She had already contacted 2 of them. Marmon watched her finish the patrol briefing, cap the marker, thank the 3 guards by name, and pick up her coffee cup, which had gone cold again because she always forgot to drink it while she was thinking. His wolf had been making its opinion on the matter very clearly known for 2 weeks. The mate bond hummed between them at a steady, warm frequency that was becoming, he realized, the baseline of his day. Not urgent, not demanding, simply present the way sunlight through a window was present, not noticed unless it was gone. That evening he found her at the private lake. She was sitting on a flat rock at the water's edge, her shoes off, her feet tucked under her, watching the last of the daylight dissolve behind the mountains. She looked, for the first time since he had walked through those ruined doorway doors, entirely still in a way that was not controlled. Just quiet. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. She did not move away. They were quiet for a while. The lake held the last blue light of the evening, and a stand of bare birch trees at the far edge reflected in the water like pale pencil lines. "I planted an herb garden at Iron Vale," she said eventually, not sadly, just factually. "Lavender and chamomile mostly. The pups were having nightmares the first winter I was there. I'd read that the scent helped." Did it? The nightmares stopped by spring. A pause. Whether it was the garden or just time, I don't know. Probably time. But the garden was something to do with my hands while I waited. He looked at her profile, the line of her jaw, the small, careful set of her mouth. "I'll have one planted for you here," he said. "Wherever you want it." She turned to look at him. The mate bond, which had been humming its steady frequency all evening, flared, just briefly, just warmly, just enough to make the space between them feel like something with dimensions. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. She held his gaze for a moment longer than she had intended to. Then she looked back at the lake. He reached up slowly and tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. The same gesture as the ceremony hall, but different now. Then it had been about recognition. Now it was about something quieter and more deliberate. His fingers barely grazed her cheekbone. Her breath caught. She did not look away from the lake, but he saw the slight change in her posture, the small, unconscious lean toward him that she probably did not know she made. He did not push. He never pushed. "When you're ready," he said, quietly. Just that. A statement that contained a question and an answer at the same time. He stood. He offered her his hand to help her up from the rock. She took it, and when she was standing, she did not immediately let go. They walked back to the estate in the dark, their shoulders close, not quite touching. The encrypted message from Ironvale arrived 3 days later. Seraphina was in the conservatory, a glass-walled room overlooking the lake that she had claimed as a working space because the morning light was good for her eyes and the view helped her think. She was reviewing the estate's quarterly portfolio when the message appeared in her inbox, routed through the secure server she had set up the first week. The sender was listed as C. Haskins, Ironvale Pack Internal Affairs. She read it once. Then she closed her laptop, set it aside, and sat very still for a moment. She was, she noted carefully, not sad about what the message described. She was not satisfied either, in the way she had feared she might be. She was simply very clear. She found Marmon in his study that evening. He was behind his desk, a massive piece of dark wood covered in organized stacks of documents, 2 laptop screens, and the remains of a coffee that had also gone cold. He looked up when she came in, and the thing that happened in his face when she entered a room, the slight easing, no, the particular attention had stopped surprising her, which meant it had started mattering to her. "Ironvale," she said. "They're in trouble." He closed his laptop halfway. "How bad?" "The Weyerhaeuser contracts are frozen. The banking accounts are locked. The property tax on 30,000 acres is due in 6 weeks." She paused. Lorelei spent a significant portion of the remaining treasury on interior design and a private chef who has since quit. Marmon's jaw tightened. "What do you want to do?" Not what should be done, not what was appropriate. What did she want to do? "I want to buy it," she said. He was very still. "Not to punish him," she said. "To finish what I started. Finch and McGraw Holdings acquires Caldwell, acquires Ironvale's agricultural operation for market value against the debt, assumes the tax liability, reinstalls the Weyerhaeuser contracts under my signature, puts Elder Ephraim Conway in operational management. The PAC treasury goes into a protected trust, housing, food, medical care, education. Isaac keeps the alpha title." She met his eyes. "He keeps the title and nothing else." Marmon looked at her across the desk for a long, quiet moment. Then he stood up. He walked around the desk to where she was standing. He put both hands on the sides of her face, gently, and pressed his forehead to hers. The mate bond blazed between them. Not the warm hum of daily life, but something brighter, the kind of light that arrives when 2 things that were meant for each other finally stop pretending they might be otherwise. "My queen," he said softly. It was the first time he had used that word. It landed in her chest like something permanent. "Or draft the documents," he said. "I'll have Wyatt assemble the legal team for tomorrow morning." The FedEx envelope arrived at the Ironvale Pack House on a Wednesday morning in grey November rain. The Finch and McGraw Holdings logo on the return address was, Clovis Haskins noted privately, the most terrifying thing he had seen in his 12 years of adult wolf life, and he had once been present for a rogue incursion that involved 4 wolves and a property line dispute that ended with someone's barn on fire. He had been appointed to his current position 3 weeks ago, when Isaac, in a state of mounting desperation, had promoted him from recreational activities coordinator to head of PAC finance. Clovis was a decent wolf, a loyal PAC member, and a genuinely enthusiastic organizer of the Ironvale Summer Games. Why, he was not a financial manager. He was aware of this. He was also aware that he was now the person responsible for explaining to the Alpha why the pack could no longer afford to keep all the lights on simultaneously. He knocked on the office door. "Come in," Isaac said. Isaac was at the mahogany desk, the same desk Seraphina had organized with such care for 6 years, which was now covered in a chaotic landscape of unopened mail, cold coffee cups, and the particular paper debris of a man who has been receiving bad news daily and has stopped filing it anywhere, because nowhere seems adequate. He looked, Clovis thought, like a man who had not slept in a month, which was accurate. "The Finch and McGraw package is here," Clovis said. He set the envelope on the desk. Isaac looked at it. He did not reach for it immediately. "Read me the terms," he said. Clovis had already read them. He had read them 3 times, hoping the numbers would change. They had not. "Finch and McGraw Holdings assumes all outstanding debt," Clovis said, "including the property tax arrears and the credit line you opened with the regional bank in October. In exchange, the holdings company acquires 100% of Iron Vale's agricultural operation, the logging licenses, the supplier contracts, the Weyerhaeuser agreement, all physical assets of the timber business." He paused. "Elder Ephraim Conway is named operational manager. The pack treasury is restructured as a protected trust. You and Luna Lorelei will receive a standard pack stipend." Isaac was quiet. "How much?" he said. $800 a month, Clovis said. "Each." The office was very silent. The door opened. Lorelei came in wearing a cream cashmere sweater and carrying a cup of tea she had made herself, because the kitchen staff had been reduced to 2 overwhelmed omegas who were managing the nursery meals and did not have additional capacity for private beverage service. She had been making her own tea for 4 days, and she had not forgiven anyone for it. "Liam in accounting says the card declined again at the home goods supplier in Charlottesville," she said. "I only ordered 12 things. It's not as if I was being excessive." "We don't have an accounting department anymore," Isaac said. Liam left. "Well, then who's handling?" "Clovis." Lorelei looked at Clovis with an expression that contained, he thought, an impression of him as a person that was not generous. "Lorelei," Isaac said. His voice was very quiet. "We have $800. She blinked. "For what?" "For the month?" The silence that followed was the particular silence of a woman whose understanding of financial reality has been, up to this point, entirely theoretical, encountering, for the first time, its practical dimensions. "That's not possible," she said. "You're the Alpha." "Being the Alpha doesn't generate revenue," Isaac said. "The revenue came from the logging contracts." He looked at the envelope on the desk. "Which are no longer ours." He reached for the silver pen. He did not read the full document. He knew what it said. More importantly, he knew what it meant, and reading every clause would not change the meaning. Seraphina Finch had built something so carefully, so completely, that the only question now was whether to let it collapse and take 180 wolves with it, or to sign his name and admit, formally and in ink, what he had done. He had traded 6 years of her life's work for a feeling. He had traded a queen for a beautiful stranger, and the stranger, as beautiful as she was, had looked at his struggling pack and seen an inconvenience to her lifestyle, not a responsibility to carry. The pen touched the signature line. The ink moved. His wolf let out a sound inside his mind that he did not have words for. Not a howl. Smaller than that. The sound of something irretrievable. He signed. 3,000 miles away, in the mahogany-paneled conference room of the Richmond estate, Seraphina slid the signed copy of the acquisition document across the glass table to Arthur Pendleton, Marmon's silver-haired lead attorney, a man who had worked for the Richmond family for 30 years and had a specific gift for making enormously consequential legal transactions feel entirely manageable. "The operational protections are absolute?" she asked. "Ironclad," Arthur said. "The trust cannot be accessed by anyone outside the approved signatory list. Elder Conway has full operational authority. The PAC's basic needs are funded through the first quarter of next year, with room to grow." He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. "It's a remarkably generous structure, my queen, given the circumstances." "The circumstances aren't the PAC's fault," Seraphina said. Marmon, standing at the window with his coffee, said nothing. But his eyes, when they found hers across the room, said several things very clearly. While he was proud of her in the specific way that a person is proud of someone whose goodness they did not expect to discover still surprises them every time. She looked away before she let him see that she had noticed. "One more thing," she said to Arthur. "The herb garden at the Iron Vale Packhouse grounds. I want the care and maintenance of it written into the operational mandate. Lavender and chamomile? It needs to be maintained." Arthur wrote it down without blinking. Marmon set down his coffee cup. He crossed the room to where she sat at the conference table. He put one hand on her shoulder. Warm, steady, just there. She did not lean into it, but she did not move away. The Richmond estate in December was a different creature from the quiet, precise compound she had arrived at in November. 350 wolves descended on the Shenandoah Valley from across the eastern seaboard and beyond. Alphas and their lunars, senior betas, diplomatic emissaries from 6 northern PACs and 2 from as far as the Canadian border. The estate expanded to receive them, additional security rotations, a catering operation that had been in planning for 6 weeks. The grand ballroom opened and lit with the warm, serious grandeur of an institution that understood its own significance. It was the most important political gathering in the Eastern Wolf calendar. It had been held at the Richmond estate for 4 generations. It was, Wyatt had told her, in his characteristically direct way, the event where everyone who matters decides whether they respect you, and you get approximately 1 evening to make the case. Seraphina stood before the full-length mirror in the master suite's dressing room and was, for the first time in recent memory, genuinely uncertain. She wore a deep burgundy gown, bespoke, fitted, the kind of thing that had been made with specific intention by a human designer in New York who did not ask questions and did excellent work. The Richmond garnet ring was on her right hand. The mating mark at the base of her neck pulsed faintly, visible above the gown's neckline, a small, jagged radiance that had been there since the night in the ballroom when she and Marmon had kissed for the first time. She looked like a queen. She knew that. She could see it. She was also aware that 350 wolves knew her history, knew she had been a chosen Luna, knew she had been replaced, or knew the Alpha King had driven 4 hours in the dark to pull her out of another wolf succession ceremony. She knew what some of them would be looking for tonight. A flaw, a soft place, evidence that she was a temporary arrangement, a sentimental choice by a powerful man, rather than the genuine article. Marmon appeared in the mirror behind her. He wore a formal black suit, crisp and severe, the kind of thing that looked like it had been made specifically for the purpose of reminding everyone in a room who held final authority. He had a particular talent for entering spaces and immediately rearranging their hierarchy simply by being present in them. She had watched him do it a dozen times in 6 weeks. It was not performed. It was simply what happened. His eyes found hers in the mirror. He crossed the room and stood behind her. His hands came to rest on her shoulders, warm, grounding, entirely steady. "You're not moving," he said. "I'm thinking. I can see that." He held her gaze in the mirror. "Tell me." "They know where I came from," she said. "They know I was Doolin's discarded chosen Luna. Some of them are going to look at me tonight and see a story about a king who made a sentimental choice and dressed it up in good jewelry." "Let them look," Marmon said. His voice dropped into the register he almost never used outside of formal settings, the one that carried centuries of authority in its frequency. "And let them find solid steel. You are not Isaac Doolin's discarded anything. You are Seraphina Finch, my mate, my equal. The goddess herself forged your soul to match mine, and there is no room in that sentence for anyone's opinion about your origins." She looked at his face in the mirror, the storm cloud grey eyes, the absolute, uncomplicated certainty. "If anyone questions your place at my side tonight," he said, "they will regret the question." She squared her shoulders. The last shadow of the old insecurity, the 11 days of guest room grief, the navy dress at the back of the ceremony hall, the walk down 40 feet of white runner that felt like broken glass, dissolved under the particular heat of being believed in by someone who had no reason to lie. "All right," she said. His hands tightened briefly on her shoulders. Then he offered her his arm. The brass doors of the ballroom opened, and the royal herald struck a silver chime, and 350 wolves went silent. They descended the staircase together. Marmon's aura moved through the room in its natural, more effortless way, the gentle, absolute rearrangement of everyone's instinctive understanding of where the center of gravity was. But Seraphina's aura, which had been quiet and contained for 6 years under a leadership structure too small to hold it properly, was no longer quiet. She felt it unfurl alongside his, not competing, not separate, woven through, crisp and cold and brilliant, the aura of someone who had earned every ounce of her authority through 6 years of impossible mornings, and the knowledge that she could outwork, outthink, and outplan nearly everyone in the room. The alphas and lunas bent their heads as they reached the floor. Necks bared. The old submission, the ancient acknowledgement. She had never had that before. She had earned everything else. Respect, trust, competence, but never this. The instinctive recognition of the room. She did not let it show on her face, but inside, her wolf was standing at its full height for the first time in a very long time, and it felt like breathing after a long time underwater. The evening moved with the particular controlled pace of a formal gathering. Careful conversations, deliberate introductions, the quiet maneuvering of wolves who understood that every exchange in this room carried diplomatic weight. Seraphina moved through it easily. 6 years of pack politics had taught her how to read a room's undercurrents, and this room, for all its grandeur, was not so different from an Iron Veil pack meeting in its fundamental mechanics. She was discussing Eastern Seaboard trade corridor adjustments with a thoughtful alpha from Virginia's northern counties when she heard the voice. I must say, as it carried, pitched to be overheard, the rumors from the Virginia packs painted a somewhat different picture. The crowd shifted. A space opened. Alpha Harlan Bonner. She recognized him. He was the alpha of the Bonner pack from the Western Range, the same alpha she had out-documented across a conference table 3 years ago over a border dispute, a man who had never quite forgiven her for it, and who had apparently decided that this evening presented an interesting opportunity. He stood in the center of the cleared space with a glass of dark liquor, his size arranged to its best advantage, his eyes moving over her with the particular expression of a man who has decided in advance what he is going to say. They said Doolin let you go because you were barren, Bonner said. Loud, clear, and every word landing in the silence around them like stones in still water. And yet here you are, wearing the king's ring. Tell me, little Luna, did you manage Doolin's timber operation the same way you managed to secure the king's interest? Interesting accounting, either way. The ballroom went very still. Seraphina felt Marmon move beside her, the slight shift of weight, the barely audible change in his breathing, the way his hand dropped from the small of her back. She knew without looking that his eyes had gone the particular shade of storm cloud dark that meant he was considering his options, and most of them were not diplomatic. She raised one hand, just one, open-palmed, at waist height, in his direction. He stopped, because he trusted her, completely. Because in 6 weeks she had demonstrated, repeatedly and without drama, or that her judgment was not inferior to his, and that her methods were frequently more effective. He trusted her, and he stopped, and the room saw this, and the room understood something immediate and significant about the nature of the relationship between its king and his mate. Seraphina turned to face Alpha Harlan Bonner. She looked at him the way she looked at a problematic contract clause, with complete attention, without emotion, already 3 steps ahead of where he thought this was going. The Bonner Pack, she said pleasantly. Western Range operations. You run 2 active quarry sites and a mineral extraction contract with the State Highway Commission. She paused, as though recalling a detail. You transport your materials via the Piedmont Freight Corridor. Bonner's smile did not waver yet. I do. The regional licensing for that corridor, as Seraphina said, falls under the Eastern Dominion's Commercial Oversight Committee. A brief pause, which I now chair. The smile began its retreat. Your renewal application arrived in my inbox last Tuesday, she continued, her voice remaining entirely warm. I had planned to process it this week. She tilted her head slightly. I find I need to reconsider the timeline. Harlan Bonner's face moved through several expressions in rapid succession, none of them dignified. His inner wolf had already performed the calculation. The math was not complex. Denied freight corridor access meant his quarry operation stopped. His quarry operation stopped. His pack's primary revenue stopped. His pack's primary revenue stopped, and the consequences of that moved very quickly and very badly. He set his glass down on the nearest surface. He went to his knees on the ballroom floor, not grudgingly. The instinct was too urgent for pride. His forehead touched the marble. I apologize, he said. To the Queen. For the insult. The ballroom let out a collective breath that was not quite silence, and not quite sound. Seraphina looked at him for a moment. Your renewal will be processed this week, she said, as planned. Then she turned her back on the kneeling Alpha and walked back to Marmon. He was looking at her. He had been looking at her the entire time, with the expression of a man who has spent 34 years being the most formidable person in every room he walked into, and has recently, and without any resentment whatsoever, discovered that this is no longer guaranteed. He pulled her in with one arm, his hand warm at the back of her neck, and when she tilted her face up toward his, he closed the remaining distance without ceremony or audience management, just directly, with the honest urgency of a man who had been patient long enough and had just watched his mate bring an alpha wolf to his knees with 4 sentences and was not inclined to wait any longer. The kiss landed and the bond sealed, not gradually, not gently, but with the absolute final click of something enormous settling permanently into place. A warmth blazed at the base of her neck where the mating mark sat, bright and certain and irrevocable. She was his. He was hers. The moon goddess, who had been paying attention, appeared to be satisfied. 6 months after the winter gathering, the Iron Vale Pack house smelled of pine resin and damp wood, and the particular staleness of a building that has been adequately maintained, but not loved. Seraphina noticed this when she stepped through the entrance on a Tuesday afternoon in May, Marmon at her shoulder, Wyatt and a 4-wolf security detail fanning into position behind them, with the quiet efficiency of people who did this constantly and had long since stopped finding it remarkable. The pack had been expecting them. Word had travelled ahead, as it always did in wolf communities, through the particular network of hearsay and pack sense that no encrypted message system had ever quite replicated. The Grand Hall, the same room where, 6 months ago, she had begun to walk 40 feet toward her own erasure, was clean and purposeful. Supply crates were organized along the eastern wall. Elder Ephraim Conway stood at the front with a clipboard and the expression of a man who had been given a genuinely difficult job and had done it with integrity. He went to one knee when she entered. The pack members behind him followed in a ripple. "Rise, Elder Conway," Seraphina said. Her voice in the hall sounded different to her than it used to. Steadier. She had not noticed it until now. "I'm not here for ceremony. I'm here to finalize the transition." Ephraim stood. He looked tired in the way that competent people look tired when they have been carrying something heavy for a sustained period. But there was a steadiness in him, a granite quality that she had always respected. "The operation is stable, my queen," he said. "The Weyerhaeuser contracts renewed on schedule. The Pack Treasury Trust is fully funded through the 3rd quarter. The pups have their winter stores. We ordered early this year, per the new protocol." He paused. "Old Pearl Haskins's medication pickup is on the Thursday rotation. I handle it myself." Something in Seraphina's chest did a small, quiet thing she did not draw attention to. "Thank you, Elder Conway," she said. "The deed to the estate." "Signed and notarized," he confirmed. "The land belongs to the Royal Trust. The Pack's right of occupation is protected in perpetuity." She nodded. She opened her briefcase, the scuffed leather one with the broken clasp she still had not fixed, because it worked fine, and broken didn't mean useless, and began the paperwork. Sarah Hobbs appeared from the hallway on the left. She was exactly as Seraphina remembered her. Small, sharp-eyed, of moving through a room with the particular, purposeful energy of someone who has always known exactly where she needs to be. She crossed the hall without stopping and wrapped both arms around Seraphina in a brief, complete, entirely unself-conscious embrace. "You look like someone who's been sleeping," Sarah said, pulling back to examine her face. "That's new?" "It is," Seraphina agreed. Sarah's eyes moved to Marmon, who was standing slightly behind Seraphina's left shoulder with his hands in his pockets, watching the room. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, with the particular assessment of a healer who is accustomed to evaluating things at a cellular level. "Good," Sarah said, apparently to both of them simultaneously, and went back to wherever she had been going. Marmon watched her leave. "Is she always like that?" "Yes," Seraphina said. "Oh, she was like that when I arrived 6 years ago, and she will be like that when we are both old." I find it deeply reassuring. The footsteps on the staircase were slow. She heard them before she saw him. The particular, halting rhythm of someone descending stairs while holding on to the railing. Someone whose center of gravity has shifted because the person they were organizing themselves around is no longer there. Isaac Doolin came down the grand staircase of the pack house he had built his identity around and stopped on the landing and looked at Seraphina. He looked the way things look when they have been through a winter they weren't prepared for. Thinner. The alpha aura that he had always carried with such natural ease was still present, but quieter. The way a fire is quiet when it has burned a long time and the wood is almost gone. His eyes were clear, which surprised her. She had expected something cloudier. He descended the last several steps slowly and stopped at a respectful distance. He did not look at Marmon directly. His inner wolf was managing the proximity of the king's aura with a visible, sustained effort that she recognized as the particular dignity of someone who has lost a great deal, and decided that dignity is the one thing left worth protecting. He looked at her, at the mating mark pulsing gold at the base of her neck, at the garnet ring, at the particular quality of stillness she carried now, the kind that had nothing to do with control and everything to do with having arrived somewhere real. "Lorelei left," he said. His voice was rough at the edges but steady at its center. 3 months ago. The bond is severing. Her father arranged it through a southern pack. A pause. "I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I thought you should know the shape of what happened." Seraphina listened. She had listened to a great many things from a great many people in her life. She was good at it. "Seraphina," he said, and then he stopped because there was no sentence adequate to finish with, and they both knew it. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it. I knew what you were worth. I think I always knew. I just believed that it would. I believed you'd always be there, and I didn't treat that carefully." The silence in the hall was complete. 180 wolves, and the only sound was the damp Virginia wind against the tall windows. Seraphina found, when she looked inward for bitterness, that it was not there. She had looked for it periodically over the past 6 months, prodded at the place where it should logically have been, and every time she found only a remarkable, complete stillness. Not forgiveness exactly. That implied an ongoing relationship, and she did not have one of those with Isaac Doolin any longer. Just the absence of a wound, the scar smooth and the skin healed over. She had spent 6 years carrying this pack. She had carried it all the way out the door and 3,000 miles north and back again. She was done carrying things that were not hers. "The pack is fed," she said. "The land is secured. Your people will survive because I chose to come back for them. That is enough." She closed her briefcase. Isaac's jaw moved slightly. He nodded. He did not reach for her, or argue, or offer anything further. And she respected him more for that than she had in a long time. Marmon moved from behind her shoulder. He crossed the hall floor and stopped in front of Isaac. Not threateningly, not close, just enough to require eye contact. Isaac managed it. "The moon goddess gave you a biological miracle," Marmon said. His voice was level and precise. "A fated mate, an irreplaceable gift." He paused. "She also gave you 6 years of the most capable partner you will ever encounter in your life, and you held on to the miracle and let go of the thing that was actually keeping your world standing." Another pause. "A fated bond is not a substitute for judgment. The goddess designs us for each other. She does not promise us wisdom about what we already have." Isaac was quiet. His inner wolf had gone very still. "Build something," Marmon said simply. "With what's left, or for them." A brief gesture toward the hall, the pack, the 180 wolves who had had no vote in any of this. That's what alphas do. He turned back to Seraphina. The king, the authority, the formal weight of 3 centuries of Richmond leadership, all of it stepped back, and what remained was just him, her mate, the man who had driven through pre-dawn dark because he felt her break from 2,000 miles away and was not willing to let her break alone. "Are we finished?" he said, soft, only for her. She looked around the hall one final time. Elder Ephraim with his clipboard and his granite steadiness. Sarah Hobbs visible through the kitchen doorway, speaking quietly to 3 pups who were watching everything from behind her legs with enormous, serious eyes. The walls of the hall, the timber and stone, the solstice candle holders she had sourced from a craftsman in Charlottesville 3 winters ago, still in their brackets. She had not lost a pack. She had built one, saved one, and outgrown one, in that order. "We are finished," she said. She slipped her hand into the crook of his arm. They walked out through the entrance together. Not the ruined doorway, which had been repaired in the month since, but the same threshold, the same building, the same Virginia air. The motorcade waited on the gravel drive. Her briefcase was loaded. The late afternoon light was breaking through the cloud cover in the particular slanted way that Virginia light has in May, gilding the pine tops and the long grass at the field's edge and the line of mountains beyond. Marmon opened the door. She paused before getting in, and she tilted her face up toward the light for a moment. The warmth of it, the clarity, the smell of pine and rain-clean earth, and the mate bond humming in her chest like something that had always been there and had simply been waiting for her to come home to it. Then she got in. The motorcade moved down the gravel drive. The Richmond estate waited 4 hours north in the mountains, with the lake and the conservatory and the herb garden that Wyatt's team had planted in November, lavender and chamomile, exactly where she'd asked, already sending up new growth in the lengthening spring days. She did not look back. She had worn the wrong crown for 6 years, in a life that was not quite wrong, but was never quite hers. She had been borrowed by someone who did not know the value of what he held, and had lost it accordingly. And she was done being borrowed. She was Seraphina Richmond now, in all the ways that mattered, in the mark on her neck, and the ring on her hand, and the mate bond in her chest, and the 4 hours of mountain road that had become, without her noticing exactly when, the direction of home. The pine trees moved past the window in a steady dark blur. Beside her, Marmon's hand covered hers on the seat. She turned her palm upward and held on. She had not lost a crown. She had simply, finally, been given the right one.